Hey people, get ready to crush everyday TOEFL iBT tests for all modules and make your dreams come true. I'm your motivator and I'll be guiding you through the test prep videos. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe or you'll be missing out on some serious preparation.
Do you prefer studying alone or in groups? Explain why. Begin speaking now.
I prefer studying alone. When I study alone, I can focus more better. In group, people talk too much and I cannot concentrate. Also, I can choose my own time to study. For example, I like study at night, but my friends like study in morning. This is problem for group study. Also, when I study alone, I can go fast or slow depend on my understanding. I think group study is waste of time sometimes. So, studying alone is better for me because I can control everything. That is why I prefer alone study.
I strongly prefer studying alone rather than in groups. The main reason is that I can concentrate much better without distractions. When I study with others, conversations often go off topic, which wastes valuable time. For instance, last semester I joined a study group for my history class, but we spent more time chatting than reviewing material. Another reason is that I can customize my study schedule. I prefer reviewing difficult concepts slowly and thoroughly, but group members often want to move quickly. Studying alone allows me to set my own pace and focus on my weak areas. For these reasons, individual studying is clearly more effective and efficient for me personally.
Personally, I have a strong preference for studying independently rather than in group settings, primarily because of the enhanced focus and personalized learning it affords. When studying alone, I can eliminate distractions and engage in deep, uninterrupted concentration, which is essential for mastering complex subjects like calculus or literary analysis. For example, when preparing for my calculus final last term, I designed a structured review plan that allowed me to allocate more time to challenging topics, ultimately resulting in a significantly improved grade. Additionally, solitary study enables me to develop critical thinking skills without relying on peers' interpretations. While group study certainly offers social benefits, the autonomy and efficiency of independent study yield consistently superior academic outcomes for me. Therefore, studying alone is unquestionably my preferred and most productive approach.
Effective immediately, Westbrook University will eliminate all printed course materials, including textbooks, syllabi, and handouts. Beginning fall 2026, all course content will be distributed exclusively through the university's online learning portal. This initiative is part of the university's sustainability campaign to reduce paper waste and lower operational costs. Students will be expected to access readings and assignments digitally via laptops, tablets, or smartphones. The university will offer a loaner device program for students who lack appropriate technology. Faculty members have been instructed to upload all necessary materials to the portal no later than 1 week before each class session. 2 students, a male and a female, discuss the university announcement posted on the campus bulletin board. The male student strongly opposes the announcement. First, he argues that reading from screens for extended periods causes serious eye strain and makes it much harder to retain information, especially since students already spend hours on devices for other coursework. Second, he challenges the adequacy of the loaner device program, claiming the university does not have nearly enough devices to serve all students who lack their own technology, meaning many students will be unable to access required materials. The student expresses an opinion about the university's announcement. State his opinion and explain the reasons he gives for holding that opinion. Begin speaking now.
The man, he don't like this new announcement from university. He thinks that reading from screen is bad for eyes. He say that when he read from computer for long time, his eyes become hurt and he cannot study well. Also, he think the loaner device program is not good. He say university don't have enough devices for all students. Some students cannot get device and they have problem to access the material. So the man thinks this plan is not a good idea for students. He want university to keep some printed materials for students who need it.
The male student opposes the university's decision to eliminate printed course materials. He provides two main reasons for his disagreement. First, he argues that reading digital content for extended periods causes significant eye strain, which negatively affects his ability to concentrate and retain information. He mentions that students already spend many hours looking at screens for other assignments, so this policy would only make the problem worse. Second, he questions the effectiveness of the loaner device program, explaining that the university does not have a sufficient number of devices for all students who need them. Because of these concerns, he believes the university should reconsider this policy and maintain at least some printed course materials for students.
The male student expresses strong opposition to the university's announcement regarding the elimination of printed course materials, and he substantiates his position with two compelling arguments. To begin with, he contends that prolonged screen reading causes considerable eye strain and cognitive fatigue, significantly diminishing a student's capacity to absorb and retain academic content. He emphasizes that students are already heavily dependent on digital devices for other coursework, meaning this new policy would only exacerbate an existing problem. Furthermore, he directly challenges the adequacy of the proposed loaner device program, asserting that the available inventory is grossly insufficient to accommodate the full number of students who lack personal devices, leaving many without reliable access to required materials. He ultimately concludes that the university implemented this policy without adequately considering student welfare, and he strongly advocates for preserving printed materials as a viable alternative.
Symbiosis is a long-term biological interaction between two different species living in close physical association. Biologists classify symbiotic relationships into three primary categories based on how each organism is affected. In mutualism, both species benefit from the relationship. In commensalism, one species benefits while the other is neither helped nor harmed. In parasitism, one species benefits at the direct expense of the other, which is harmed. Symbiosis plays a critical role in ecosystem stability, influencing nutrient cycling, reproduction, and survival strategies across virtually all known habitats on Earth. A biology professor lectures about symbiosis, focusing on the mutualistic relationship between clownfish and sea anemones as a vivid, real-world illustration of the concept defined in the textbook. The professor describes how clownfish live among the stinging tentacles of sea anemones, which would paralyze other fish but do not harm the clownfish due to a protective mucus coating. The clownfish benefits by gaining shelter and food scraps from the anemone, while the anemone benefits because the clownfish chases away predatory butterfly fish and provides nutrients through its waste. The professor emphasizes this is a textbook example of mutualism, where both organisms clearly gain from the arrangement. Using the example from the lecture, explain the concept of symbiosis as described in the reading. Begin speaking now.
The reading says symbiosis is when two different species live together. There are three types: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. The professor talks about clownfish and sea anemones. The clownfish lives in the anemone and doesn't get hurt. The anemone also gets something from the clownfish. So this is mutualism because both animals benefit. This shows symbiosis in real life.
According to the reading, symbiosis refers to a long-term interaction between two different species, and it includes three types: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. The professor illustrates mutualism using the relationship between clownfish and sea anemones. The clownfish is protected by a special mucus that prevents the anemone's stinging tentacles from harming it, so the clownfish can live safely inside the anemone. In return, the clownfish protects the anemone from predators like butterfly fish and provides nutrients through its waste. Because both species clearly benefit, this is a strong example of mutualistic symbiosis as defined in the reading.
The reading defines symbiosis as a sustained biological interaction between two distinct species, categorized as mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism depending on whether each organism benefits, is unaffected, or is harmed. The professor elaborates on mutualism specifically through the compelling example of clownfish and sea anemones. As the professor explains, clownfish possess a unique mucus coating that renders them immune to the anemone's otherwise paralyzing tentacles, allowing them to shelter safely within it and feed on leftover food particles. Simultaneously, the anemone gains significant advantages. The clownfish actively drives away butterfly fish, which would otherwise consume the anemone, and its waste delivers essential nutrients. This bidirectional exchange of benefits is precisely what the reading identifies as mutualism, making the clownfish-anemone pair an ideal illustration of symbiosis functioning at the ecosystem level.
A geology professor delivers a lecture explaining how sedimentary rocks form, covering two main processes: weathering and erosion of source material, and the compaction and cementation of deposited sediments, with concrete examples such as sandstone formation in riverbeds and limestone formation from marine organisms. The professor first explains that sedimentary rock formation begins with weathering, where wind, water, and temperature changes break down existing rocks into small particles called sediments, which are then transported by rivers or wind and deposited in layers in low-lying areas such as riverbeds or ocean floors. Second, the professor describes lithification, the process by which accumulated sediment layers are compressed under their own weight and bonded together by dissolved minerals, such as calcite or silica, acting as natural cement, ultimately forming solid rock. As examples, the professor notes that sandstone forms when sand grains deposited in ancient riverbeds are lithified over millions of years, while limestone often originates from the compacted shells and skeletal remains of marine organisms on the ocean floor. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain sedimentary rock formation. Begin speaking now.
The professor explains how sedimentary rocks form. First, rocks are broken into small pieces by wind and water. These pieces move and go to rivers or oceans. Then they build up in layers. After a long time, the layers press together and become rock. The professor gives examples of sandstone and limestone. Sandstone comes from sand in rivers and limestone comes from shells in the ocean. So this is how sedimentary rocks are made.
According to the professor, sedimentary rocks form through two main processes. First, existing rocks are broken down into small particles called sediments through weathering caused by wind, water, and temperature changes. These sediments are carried by rivers or wind and deposited in layers in places like riverbeds or the ocean floor. Second, over time the layers of sediment are compressed under their own weight and cemented together by minerals like calcite or silica, forming solid rock through a process called lithification. For example, sandstone forms from sand grains deposited in ancient riverbeds, while limestone forms from the shells and bones of marine organisms on the ocean floor.
The professor outlines sedimentary rock formation as a two-stage geological process. In the first stage, pre-existing rocks are gradually broken down into small fragments known as sediments through weathering, a process driven by agents such as wind, water, and thermal expansion. These sediments are subsequently transported by rivers or wind currents and deposited in successive layers within low-energy environments, such as riverbeds and ocean floors, where particle movement slows and material accumulates over vast timescales. In the second stage, called lithification, the weight of overlying sediment layers generates significant pressure that compacts the deeper layers, while dissolved minerals, notably calcite and silica, percolate through the spaces between particles and crystallize, effectively cementing them into coherent, solid rock. The professor illustrates these stages with two examples: sandstone, which originates from quartz sand grains deposited in ancient fluvial environments that were subsequently lithified over millions of years, and limestone, which typically derives from the compacted skeletal remains and shells of marine organisms that accumulated on prehistoric ocean floors. Together, these examples clearly demonstrate how surface materials are systematically transformed into durable sedimentary rock through erosion, deposition, and lithification.
Hey people, how was your test? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or you'll be missing out on some serious fun. See you tomorrow!